Hey guys, welcome to Dr. Kim Live today. Today we're going to talk about traffic signs in your marriage. Stop, yield, caution, one way, don't enter. We see these signs almost every single day. What if they were in your marriage? What would you do then? We'll come back and talk about that in just a minute. All right, thanks for joining us today on Dr. Kim Live here on YouTube. I'm excited to have you guys with us. And we will be talking about traffic signs and your marriage. What in the world does that mean? Well, you know, traffic signs are there. We pass them every day. Sometimes we read them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we obey them, sometimes we don't. Most of us. They're there to protect us, to guide us, to warn us. We want all the other drivers to watch for those signs and abide by them. Yeah, we want a little flexibility for ourselves. Because if I'm in a hurry, do I really have time to stop if there's no other cars around? If there's no other cars in my line of vision, then why do I even need to yield? And what about the caution sign? I don't need some sign to tell me to be cautious. So what if these signs were in your marriage? Would you read them? Would you obey them? Would you ignore them? If the signs were there, would you want your spouse to follow them to the letter? What about you? Would you follow them or would you ignore them? Stop sign's pretty cut and dry. Stop means stop. If we don't stop, we could get a ticket. We could get in a wreck. We could get hit. But there's stop signs in marriage too. They mean the same thing in marriage as they do on the streets. Two big ones that I see in counseling all the time are pornography and infidelity. The bottom line is you stop. You don't go there. No trial runs, no baby steps, no just this once. We have to obey the sign and stop. And their yield signs are all over my marriage, but often I ignore them too. Often interpret yield to mean that I don't get my way and Nancy does. And what it really means for me is to be unselfish when I don't really feel like it. The number one problem, I've said it for years in marriage, is selfishness. I made an interesting observation. When I'm driving and I obey the yield sign, do you realize I've never gotten in a wreck? And yet, in my marriage, when I've been unselfish, we have never, ever gotten in a fight. Being unselfish is good for your marriage. Yield. Marriage is a one-way street, or it needs to be. One way that puts God first. One way that's a lifetime commitment to your spouse. One way that's for better, for worse, for rich or for poor, for sickness and health, from the day you take those vows till the day you die. Do not enter. Those kind of signs sometimes make me want to enter. I'm just kind of curious, want to know what could be there, but it could be something dangerous. It could be something down that street that could cause me problems. It could be something that if I risk and go in there, I could get hurt. And if I don't heed the sign, I'm crossing a boundary that someone else put up. So are there do not enter signs in marriage? So what if you've been in an argument and your spouse says they need some time to think things through? Give them the time. What if your spouse says, not tonight, how about in the morning? Respect their request. You get the idea. Listen to your spouse. Respect what they ask of you. Do this for them, and the odds are they're going to do the same thing for you. Stop. Yield. One way. Do not enter. If it's hurting your marriage, stop. Be unselfish. Yield. God first, spouse second. One way. Respect. Don't enter. Traffic signs in your marriage. We got a YouVersion plan that talks about this, and it's called Traffic Signs in Your Marriage. It's a 5-day plan. This is part 1, and we'll do a Dr. Kim Live in a few weeks. We'll do part 2, but right now it's part 1. There is a video I'm going to show you from part 1, and here we go.
I actually remember riding in cars that didn't have seat belts. Then seat belts became standard equipment, but no one really used them very much. In my family growing up, we wore them when we traveled out of the city, but not in the city. Then people began doing studies which showed that seat belts actually saved lives. It was an evolutionary process from no seat belts to seat belts to seat belts work. Today there are signs that remind us to buckle up, but most of us have already done that before we see the sign. Buckle up, it makes sense, it saves lives. Do you buckle up in your marriage? Do you do the things to keep it safe? Here are 2 suggestions. First, pray together. Now, I can hear some of you saying, I can't do that. That would be too weird, yet you can do that, and yes, at first, it may be weird. People ask me, what is one thing I can do to improve my marriage? My answer 100% of the time is pray together. Pray for each other, pray silently together, pray out loud together. There's no magic formula. Just start today and pray. Second, worship together. There's something special that happens when we worship with our spouse. In Genesis 2, we see God spend time with Adam and Eve together. There was something very special about that, and it's a model for us. Worship together every week with your spouse. I promise you, it will make a difference. Buckle up, keep your marriage safe, pray, worship, start now.
All right, that traffic signs in your marriage, it's on our YouVersion Bible plans. There's a lot of them there for Awesome Marriage. Hope you will try some of those and kind of get a better shot here. Let's try that. See if that works a little bit better. Okay, traffic signs in your marriage. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about that. What does that mean? What does it mean for your marriage? What if we talk about the ones that I just already mentioned before we did the video? And so what I want to do is to give you guys a chance to ask questions. So if you'll put questions in the chat, I would love for you to see if I can get those right. Make sure I can see the chat here. All right, got you guys. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. I am having trouble. Not you guys, it's me. So we have a couple questions that came in. Let's go with the first question that came in. I'll get back to where I want to be here. Question is, what would you suggest when your life throws a detour and affects your marriage, like finances, death, sick family member, needing to move on for a period of time? Well, the reality is that life is probably going to throw you a detour at some point. I mean, it just does. You know, Jesus tells us that in this life we will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So we know that we're going to have hardships in our marriage at times, in our life sometimes. So when it when it affects you in your marriage, I would say this. I think that's the time that you turn into each other. That's the thing, you know what, everything we talk about is putting whatever the issue is, whatever the problem is in front of you, and you stand as a couple side by side together and you address that problem. So if it's a detour, you work together. How do we solve this together? What has this done to our marriage? How does this affect our marriage? How does it affect you? How does it affect me? How does it affect our life? And then together, you decide how you would approach that. So maybe it is a sick family member that needs to move in with you for a period of time. So you decide, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make sure we have time for each other? How can we properly take care of that person? But again, you're solving the problem together. And I think that's the key. If it's finances, then you come together and you say, man, I don't know what happened. Well, we probably do know what happened, but we're in a mess right now. We've got to come together and get out of it. Again, it's a detour. You got to deal with your finances, but you do it together. If you do that, what happens, what I see when you go through these detours of life, you can actually grow and improve your marriage relationship. So don't let those detours, when they come, pull you apart. Instead, let them put you together and ask God for his help in that. Hope that helps. Okay, another question. How can you slow down and overcome different life schedules due to work and continue to find time for each other and dates? You know, that's a question that we get asked a lot, or something similar to that, because in our culture, we're very, very busy. There's a lot of demands. We create a lot of the business ourselves. I get that. But I think whatever your life is, then it's got to be intentional about setting time aside for each other. So I only give a couple of suggestions that I've had couples do. One is a couple that was very busy, kids, all that kind of stuff. They would sit down on Sunday. They would look at the schedule for the week. They would carve out times for them to be together, like their date night, time every day to spend time together, and they would hold that sacred, because what they found, if they didn't do that they would have things getting in the way of that time they had together. So they were going to go together, have time together, say at 9 o'clock after the kids were bed on Monday night. But somebody calls one of them a little before 9. When that's on their calendar, they can say, you know, I've got this set aside, or you cannot answer it for one thing. Or you can say, I've got this time set aside for my spouse, and you spend that time together. So you may have to be very intentional about it to make sure it happens. The other thing is, if you have to sacrifice a little bit of sleep or a little bit of discomfort for a period of time to make sure you have time to connect, it's worth it, especially if it's just for a short time. But I think, again, it's being intentional about knowing how important it is to spend time together, taking the time to do that, and working on it as a couple. Okay. One of the things that we talk about a lot is sex and marriage. We also talk about the One Thing videos a lot. And so let's look at one of those now.
You know, when a married couple in counseling says their sex life is not what they'd like it to be, I ask them if they both have talked about what they want and what they need in that area of their marriage. Almost every couple admits they have never talked about those things. What about you and your marriage? Where would you rate your sex life today on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the very best? What's the highest it's ever been? Have the two of you shared with each other your sexual wants and needs? I think there's probably a number of reasons why couples don't talk about these things. For men, there's this myth that we're supposed to know everything about sex already. So we don't ask. Women are often afraid to ask because they don't know how their husbands will respond. Guys, we may know some things, but we need to know in particular about our wives. Ladies, don't be afraid to ask. He might surprise you. And you can always say, no, I'm not really comfortable with that. The point is to get the conversation started. So today, for your one thing, sit down with your spouse and each of you say one thing you'd like to include in your sex life together.
You know, we talk about that a lot, and we talk about how important it is to talk about sex together as a couple. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't share what you like and don't like, you're just guessing. And I think you improve your sex life greatly by taking the time to talk about things, to discuss it. Okay? All right. I'd love for you guys on the chat to put some questions on. I don't have any questions there right now. We've got some that came in ahead of time, and so we'll look at those. Full of my Yeti water today. All right, what are some tips, things to do to put God first inside your marriage? Okay, what I would say this, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to put God first in your life. If I'm going to put God in my marriage, if I have not put him first in my life, I feel like I'm going to run into big problems. I'm going to run into situations, issues, things that I cannot deal with. And so it's very important for me to put him first in my marriage or in my life myself. That means that for me, it means that I get up in the morning and I have a quiet time where I pray, and it's just open conversation with God. It's not a big, elaborate thing. It's just what's on my heart and talking to God about it and asking his help for the day and praying for the people I love and care about. And then I read the Bible. Nancy and I are reading Through the Bible plan this year. We happen to be using the chronological one. We both read it. We read it separate times, but then we can talk about it if there's something there that kind of piques our interest or we have a question about. That's worked out really good for us. And that's a way to put God in the center of your marriage also, is to do the YouVersion reading plan together. Whether it's the whole Bible, whether it's one of our awesome marriage plans, or whatever it is, it gets you both in the Bible together. But for you and me individually, I've got to have that time with God. I've got to read his word. Worshiping in our church is very important to me, to be there every week and hear a message and be challenged or just helped in that way, and just to be around other believers. When I do those things consistently, it makes it a lot easier for me to do that in my marriage, to lead Nancy, to help her and I together put God first and do our reading plans and pray together and go to church together and worship together. Doing those things consistently together is a way to put God first at your marriage. You know, we talk about in the very first marriage, Adam and Eve, God came and spent time with them every day. Well, I think that's what he still wants with us, that special time with us every single day. Okay? Second question, what do you suggest we do if we feel we're at a dead end in our marriage? That's tough. You know, one of the things that we do, one of our resources that's free, and you can go on Awesome Marriage and search for it, and it is 10 things to do before you decide to go to get a divorce. And because I think sometimes we give up or easy, or we think we are at that dead end, what can we do? So I'd encourage you to get that resource. The other thing I'd probably encourage you to do, to either get a mentor couple or to get counseling, and to know that there is hope no matter what you've been through. I've seen couples over the years go through excruciating things, painful things, difficult things, and I've seen them overcome that with God's help. So wherever you are in your marriage, if you feel like you're at that dead end, there's hope. God always has an answer for you. You just have to both, be willing to seek that, work on it, and it's going to take work. But I guarantee you the work will be every bit worth the effort that you put into it. All right, one of the vlogs that we had that we're going to have today is something, die to self. Let's look at this.
Die to self. So selfishness is our number 1 enemy when it comes to marriage. The foundation of every good piece of marriage advice is to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow Jesus. So after all, your marriage isn't about you, is it? It's about Jesus. Every time I start to get selfish, I'll hurt our marriage. No good or godly thing can ever come out of selfishness. But when I choose to obey Christ, and when I live sacrificially and serve Nancy like he did, my marriage thrives. So does my witness. I pray that when people look at Nancy and I in our marriage, they really see a glimpse of something even better and more important. The marriage between Jesus and the people he died for. So what selfish thing do you need to let go of this week? Where do you need to pick up your cross and follow him? In what area of your life do you need to die to self? Your marriage will breathe life when you choose to die to self.
All right, we are back with a couple more questions. Mario, thank you so much for your kind words. We didn't get any questions today on the chat. I would love to have some. Please tell people that we do this every Tuesday, 2 o'clock on YouTube, and certainly they can, if they want to ask live questions, and they can always watch it later on YouTube, and we have a lot of people doing that now. So help us get the word out about this live show. The idea is for me to just have time to spend with you to answer your questions or the ones that people send in ahead of time. Okay, I've got a couple more questions before we wrap up. How can I keep from doing U-turns and looking in the past at what my spouse has done that affected our marriage? Yeah, we do that a lot, don't we? We want to look at what they did wrong. We don't usually look at what we did wrong. Let me tell you, I think if any marriage is going to move forward, if any marriage is going to be everything God wants it to be, you got to forgive. And forgiving for me means if Nancy has done something or I've done something to her, we have to forgive it and we have to forget it and not bring it up again and move on. I know that's hard sometimes, depending, because you're thinking, some of you right now, you don't know what he did or you don't know what she did. I get that. But God tells us to forgive. And he's model. He's the one who authored all this anyway. And he knows that unforgiveness in a marriage is a death knell. So you've got to forgive your spouse, whatever that takes. If you need to go to counseling to work it through, if you need to talk some things out, whatever it takes, make sure you can forgive and move on. God says our sins are as far away as the east is from the west. I know we're human. I know we long on to things, but God can help you to let go. Just trust him in it. Seek him. Get some help. All right, last question today. How can you stay on the one-way street God desires for your marriage? I think you got to be intentional. I think you got to do the things we talked about in some of the other questions. I think you have to do it every single day. There's no shortcuts. There's no getting your tank full and then just coasting. No, your tank has to be filled up every day. And I know that sounds like work, and it is work, but the results are amazing because you'll have the marriage that God designed for you. This is the relationship in this life that he says is number one. Next to our relationship with him, it's the number one relationship. He has all kinds of great things for you in your marriage. You just have to take the time and put in the effort to do it. He is definitely going to meet you there. He is definitely going to do his part. All right, next week we are going to talk about a foundation that will go the distance. Some good things there to talk about marriage and how to go the distance in your marriage relationship. And I think you'll enjoy that next week. We'll talk about a bunch of good things. Let people know that what we're doing and that we are here. Thanks so much for joining us today on Dr. Kim Live, and We'll see you next week.